Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm very grateful to the AEOS and to the BBVA for inviting me to share some of the results of work we did within a European working group entitled Educating for Entrepreneurship that was organized by the Association of European Conservatoires and which took place from 2011 to 2014 with a group which consisted of representatives of conservatoires and of the profession. What we did, first of all, was we asked ourselves, what was entrepreneurship? And on the first day we came together, this is what we saw, or this is what we thought. More to the point. Let's see if I can. So you see, we said that first and foremost there was an artistic vision that was based on contexts, soft skills and hard skills, and that this in turn would eventually lead to what we called the unique selling point. Later, as our work progressed, this became a bigger diagram, and this is, I think, probably the most important. Oops, it's gone too fast. What we realized is we had forgotten all about the audience. And this is something that Eric was talking about this morning. So here, what we're talking about is that today, and I would just like to add by way of supporting evidence, that the European Commission, through its Creative Europe project, came out with a study last year that said two things were going to be important for artists in the coming years, and this was based on studies done across the EU. One was the digital shift, and we heard all about that this morning, one's ability to swim, so to speak, with the different platforms that exist. And the second was the fact that every artist or person in the audiovisual sector from now on will be called upon to self-manage projects. And basically when we say self-manage, what we're talking about are all these skills which we see here. So, as we were saying earlier, that first and foremost, we have an artistic vision and a project that's based on empathy. Eric was talking this morning about how it is that who we are is what 80% of what people receive. So who we are, this empathy. I like to use the word musician-citizen or artist-citizen. Here it's indicated as civic responsibility. So that we are all part of our society. We're not simply out there just doing any old thing that we happen to want to do. It's something that has meaning for us, and it has meaning in a greater context. We're sensitive to our context. If we're sitting here in Madrid, it's not the same thing as if we're sitting in Prague or in Paris or in Scotland. So these different contexts have a bearing, and they will translate differently so that somebody sitting in the United States in one of Eric's stories this morning might have a different situation than somebody sitting here in Europe. And then likewise, these soft skills, these how we work as a team, how we are building community. I think in the end, this is all about building community, and in fact, that's very much what orchestras are about, building community. And I won't read this all out loud to you. And then the hard skills, which are listed here. And what's important is how these come together with our audiences. And I would add also, of course, the digital audience. And there are endless numbers of audiences that we're interacting with. And so it is these two things that come together and that creates something unique and something special. And that's what we heard this morning in the stories that Eric was telling us that were so beautiful and so moving about children thinking about what it meant to have heroic music, for example. I think that probably this is one of the most important things we did in this working group was to think about this paradigm. Obviously, because we were a European working group, we had to also look at models of good practice. So we looked at models of good practice both in terms of higher education and in terms of the profession. And because I'm coming here to talk to a group of people from orchestras, I was tempted to look at the orchestral question, but I encourage you to go onto our website, which I mentioned earlier. And here you can see everything that we did, and you can look at these models of good practice, which are very different. There are examples of incubators. There's an incubator project at the Guildhall School, which is a wonderful project called Creative Entrepreneurs. There's a project in Scotland, which is called Scottish Institute for Entrepreneurship, which reaches out all across higher education in Scotland in a transdisciplinary way, and which is quite fascinating. There's a joint project involving 5 art schools and a business school from across Northern Europe in an intensive project, so that's yet another approach. And there's a pop and jazz academy where they teach business and jazz side by side. So those are just some examples that you can see here on the website. Today, I thought I would give you 2 short examples. One of the things that we discovered is that, of course, it always is very important where you sit. Where you sit, you think everybody sees the world the way you do. And in fact, if you go slightly down the street or into another country, you'll see that what constitutes entrepreneurship is a very different thing in a different place. So just a few words about this Collegium 1704 and Collegium Vocal. This was the result of a horn player named Václav, and I've just lost his last name, but that's not a problem, Václav Lux. And he had to go outside of the Czech Republic in the early 90s to learn how to perform in the Baroque style, because there was no teaching in this authentic style. But his dream was to come back and to provide, to constitute an ensemble that would work in this style, that would provide work for Czech musicians, many of whom had had to go out across Europe, and that would really make Prague a destination for Baroque music. And so this was founded in 2005, and it was an initiative of musicians dedicated exclusively to Baroque music, and it is unique to the Czech Republic. It's inspired by Central European traditions, and the title is even based on a work by a composer from the Czech Republic called Jan Dismas Zelenka. And right from the start, the idea was to really work and function as a family with strong relationships between the leader and the orchestra and between the ensemble and its public. And that they believed that they had to function as a community. We talked about this a little bit earlier. And that in so doing and in connecting to their Czech traditions and their Czech audiences, that in turn they could have a broader European reach, which they indeed have done. So just to say quickly what it is they thought made the difference and why were they successful, it comes back to this diagram. They were aware and sensitive to their particular context, their historical context. They were a direct outgrowth of the Velvet Revolution. And they were aware of their changing audiences and the evolutions of the society around them and those challenges. They felt that they had used collaborative and reflective skills, and they had been able to exploit opportunities and engage in peer-to-peer learning. And they felt that they had had a capacity to dream and invent, to take risks, to accept failures, and to learn from these. So this is one example. And I would add that today this ensemble is considered one of the leading Baroque ensembles in Europe. They're fantastic. And just to show you that if we think, in some places we think entrepreneurship has to be really wild, this is what they look like. So it's a kind of traditional vision. For some of us, we would say, oh, this is very traditional. But if you hear their story is anything but traditional, and it's the right story in the right place. So a second example, a little bit closer to home where I happen to be, and a graduate of the school where I work. Les siècles means the centuries. And from the start, this project was, the idea behind this project was to create a high-quality independent orchestra, which would be not permanent, engaged in educational missions and the society at large, be project-based, capable of performing the broadest range of repertoires, from Baroque to rock music, and collaborating with other art forms. The orchestra would be self-governed, with musicians fully integrated into all aspects of the decision-making process. So what does this mean? One of their specificities is that they perform on relevant period instruments from the 17th to the 20th centuries. They've created their own instrument collection, and they saw their relationship to their audiences and to educational outreach as a key part of who they were. They also saw the idea that they would be continually learning as part of who they were. So in other words, many of the musicians in this ensemble didn't know how to perform on Baroque instruments, but they learned how to do so. And then, of course, this idea of creating community with a strong feeling of belonging. And in this particular orchestra, there's no distinction in pay according to your place in the orchestra. So you can be first violin and you will get the same amount of money as if you're in the back row. So that was one thing. And they also gave governance. Governance was the responsibility of everyone. So that means that they share, yes, in decisions on programs and choice of section musicians. And they also share in the profits and losses of their recording company. There are other inspiring examples, and I don't have the time to give them to you, but if you spend time on our website, you will see that there are other stories. And just so you know that this continues to be, that's Les Siècles, that there are new European initiatives. There's an initiative that was just taken based in Turkey, the Omega Project, and these people have created a 14-week module for entrepreneurship, which you can download online. And then there's a new entrepreneurship working strategic partnership that you can find out more about at this website. So just in closing, I think my important message is that entrepreneurship is really grounded in our society. It is about creating community and connecting to each other in a way that is meaningful in the place where we are sitting. Thank you.